Good morning. It is Monday, April 3rd, 2023. The House and Senate are on recess, and this is DC Signal to Noise. Since we last spoke, agency secretaries and administrators paraded in front of Congress to defend budget requests. Former President Donald Trump was indicted. Severe weather battered the Midwest with numerous tornadoes and widespread destruction. Another blizzard is churning up for the northern and central plains, and more severe weather for the Midwest. Iowa and LSU played for the NCAA Women's Championship. Congrats to the LSU Tigers for last night's big win, or yesterday afternoon's big win. San Diego State and UConn play for the Men's Championship tonight. And another season of Major League Baseball got started. Welcome to you all. Glad that you're with us. I'm AgriTalk host Chip Flory, and that is Pro Farmer Policy Analyst Jim Wiesemeyer. Good morning, Jim.
Yeah, I wonder why they didn't play that women's game at night, because it's attracted a lot of attention.
Oh, huge attention.
Yeah.
Huge attention for women's basketball. The Iowa-South Carolina game had more basketball viewers than the NBA All-Star game.
Wow. I think 5.5 million, I think.
Yeah, it was a huge number. That was a much more fun game to watch. Unfortunately, now, before I say this, I will say this. If Iowa could have stopped LSU from making a three or a bucket at all in the second quarter, and if they could have gotten a defensive rebound, if Iowa could have gotten defensive rebounds in the fourth quarter, I think the game would have ended differently. It was so unfortunate, though, that the refs inserted themselves into the game the way that they did on both sides. On both sides, I'm not picking sides on this, but the conversation on social media was off the charts. After the game yesterday.
Yeah, I saw that in all accounts that I read. It got too aggressive on that one. Well, here's my ring.
Right here, baby.
I'm just talking about the player for LSU. Not too classy, but they won.
Hey, you know what? And that was in response to what Caitlin Clark had done earlier. Caitlin is not afraid to talk trash, and she will respond if someone on the other team says something to her first. She's going to say something.
Yeah.
And but it was a little different following her around on the floor trying to get her attention. That was that seemed weird. Okay, Jim, quick question. Do you know what happened 50 years ago today? No?
No.
Motorola made the first cell phone call 50 years ago.
StarTAC or what? Was it?
Yeah.
Or what? Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
wow.
And they called.
That was the brick. You mean the brick?
The brick.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yes. And then he made the call to a rival over at Bell to let him know that he was calling him on a cell phone. You want to talk about trash talk?
Yeah.
That's like the ultimate trash talk.
That's where you literally want to hang up.
No doubt. Okay, buddy, how you doing? Everything good?
Pretty good here.
I don't know how your recovery's coming.
I don't even know if the Nationals won yet. I didn't even look.
Yeah.
I don't know whether we're 0-3 or not.
The Cubs started off 1-0 and are now 1-2. So, Melody, good morning. She is already in on the comments section. If you would like to participate in the conversation this morning, have a question for Jim or for me that you would like to ask, please go ahead and do that. And the comments tab is there someplace on your screen to do that.
Well, Melody is asking about a report that came out Friday, Chip, on prospective plantings. She's asking whether there's enough seed of corn, but I would say yes, there is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And if there isn't enough seed, they'll grow enough seed. They can still do so in Brazil. They can still do so in Chile. They've got all kinds of options to make sure that there's enough seed to go around.
And there should be enough fertilizer as well.
Yes, I would say. And, I've had 2 or 3 people text me this morning say, where did all those acres come from? Well, they took a couple million acres from cotton, and I think they still could take even more from cotton to put onto corn first, soybean second. And then they got the prevent plant acres back in the northern plains. That's another issue. But Jim, there's still 4 foot of snow on the ground in some areas of North Dakota, 2 foot of snow in other areas. They really haven't melted that much, and they've got another storm coming in the next 48 hours.
And Melody asked, what's the futures price impact? Well, it's to be determined, actually, because on the surface, you got more corn that would have been slightly negative. But as Chip said, you got to get it planted.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly right. And that's I wrote my column for the Next Farm Journal magazine yesterday afternoon, Jim, or actually over the noon hour. I had to get it done before the game was on, of course. But I start with, okay, now we got to get 92 million acres of corn planted is how I start the column. But then if you assume that it does get planted and assume a harvested rate of, somewhere between 91 and 91.5%, and you assume the trendline yield of 181.5, it does put upward pressure on the carryover for the end of the 2023-24 marketing year, which does put downside pressure on the price that was projected by USDA at the Ag Outlook Forum, which was $5.60 for a national on-farm cash price. It would pull down on that.
Although the stocks report indicated tightness.
Yeah, but not tight enough.
Okay.
Not tight enough. Not from the work that I did on it. It would pull down on that price from 560. Soybeans, the tighter stock situation, plus, I don't know if you can get all the way to 300 million bushels on carryover at the end of the 23-24. So 1275, something like that, for a national average on-farm cash price was kind of the work that I put in on it.
Okay.
So, okay. Let's take a look at some other issues from last week. And Jim, it was a parade of administrative secretaries and administrators, agency administrators that went before Congress last week. Start with Secretary Vilsack. What were some of the highlights?
Well, he appeared 3 times, Chip, and he did get queried on a couple of things, primarily on the use of Commodity Credit Corporation. Now, even Republican lawmakers acknowledged they left in a loophole that gave him more discretionary authority, and of course, Vilsack used it. And then Vilsack said, relative to the billions of dollars he tapped it for in the climate change area, Chip, he said farm groups, including Farm Bureau and others, pressed him to do that. So he countered with that. And of course, we had the questions on the food stamp funding and worker requirements and things like that. While it was an expanded discussion on lengthy issues that we've already talked about earlier this year.
Yeah, very much. What about the highlights of the testimony from EPA Administrator Regan?
Well, of course, it centered in part for the Aggies on the waters of the U.S. rule. And he keeps on saying that by putting out a new EPA Biden administration rule, definition, if you will, on WOTUS, it gives them just flexibility whenever the Supreme Court comes out with their ruling. It'll be easier to adjust, he said. That remains to be seen, but he was fielded with a lot of questions, Chip. It's just still uncertainty on that topic.
Yeah, we should make note that he did make some comments on E15 and year-round availability.
Yes, but they need to come out with an announcement. Now, we did get good news from Japan on Friday that U.S. Trade Representative Tai announced with the change in their biofuels policy, it could mean millions of dollars in exports of U.S. ethanol to Japan. So that is a good development.
Yep. Okay. Homeland Security Administrator Mayorkas was grilled in front of Congress. And then he followed up with an appearance on 60 Minutes last night. It was he almost took it as an opportunity to diffuse some of the issues on 60 Minutes. It seemed like a weird combination.
Yeah, well, even some Democrats are really queasy when it comes to him, Chip, because he
Yeah.
keeps on saying the border is secure, and we know it's not. Of course, some people go a bit overboard on the fentanyl side, that he's killing a lot of children. That's a twofold thing. It brings China into the equation. The border is not secure on that, but it's also an American problem too, because they're buying the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But he is the
Frustrating.
most negative defined cabinet secretary in the Biden administration, almost from the get-go, because of his lack of being truthful, if you will,
Yeah.
on the border.
Right.
On the remember the horses, the horse bit there,
Yeah.
that they were proven wrong, and they still didn't acknowledge that they were wrong.
Well, and they didn't do anything, as I understand. They didn't do anything for the border agents that were suspended.
Yes.
They didn't bring them back.
No, we just need a clearing of the people involved with that. Hopefully, we'll get there.
Okay. We better get to this, Jim, because it is the news in the markets here today and over the weekend. OPEC Plus cut its oil output projections. So, what are the details here?
Well, this has smacks of Putin working with the Saudi Arabia, Chip. Remember, he said he'd get back at the U.S. and Western allies for how they priced world oil. And you had a cut. It's going to be over 1 million barrels a day. And that was a surprise. That came out, I know it was over the weekend because I wrote about it then. And so now crude oil is back in the news because, WTI crude futures, which is U.S. futures, they surged past $81 a barrel at the open. That's the highest point since January. And of course, the White House said, they disagreed with the announcement, but it's going to lead to higher gasoline prices, Chip, no doubt about it. And the world crude, Brent crude, opened at its best level in nearly a month, and it's over $86 a barrel, or at least it was earlier this morning. So you have all sorts of analysts, including Goldman Sachs, altering their oil production and price forecast.
Okay, May WTI gapped sharply higher this morning and actually opened just above 80 cents a barrel, traded as high as 81.69, backed all the way off to 79, and is currently at about 79.73, which is up more than $4 a barrel. So it is a legitimate big move. I would guess that it's going to have an impact on the grain trade when things get started here in just a couple of minutes.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
And there's not much more the Biden administration can do because they've tapped the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And in fact, there's been some conjecture that Saudi Arabia was upset at the Biden administration when they declined to refill the SPR when crude prices were very low earlier this year, Chip. So so they decided to get some payback.
I'll have to disagree. There's more that he could do. I mean, you got to ask yourself why they did what they did. And the reason
you mean
that
production?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that takes a while.
Well, it does take a while, but the energy policy of the current administration has opened the door for stuff like this.
Yes.
By reducing U.S. production, we created BRICSA. Okay. Put an SA on the end of the brick. And who would have thought that it would happen as quickly as it has? Now, I'm not saying that they just started talking 2 weeks ago. The conversation has been happening for quite some time. I get that. But the creation of the BRICSA countries now is, I feel intimidated by it, Jim.
Well, that gets into all sorts of policies, Chip. And I know I sent you a draft article that I wrote for Pro Farmer maybe this week on the impact of challenging the dollar. And those countries you mentioned are a big force in that.
Yep. Okay.
It takes a while.
Okay. As long as we're talking about the dollar's default policy status, let's go to a question or a comment here from Gary. And I haven't been all the way through it yet, so this one's coming off unedited to you, Jim. China buying LG from France in yen instead of the dollar. I think that'd be yuan. Yuan, or however you say it. The
Yuan.
Chinese currency.
Yeah, renminbi or yuan.
Okay. Instead of the dollar is officially the end of the dollar's line reserve currency status. Chip, I agree with the guest you had on last week. While I think military is capable, I do not see this administration saving the dollar. That is, if China balloons and Afghanistan are examples. Okay, that's pretty weak examples. Yep. Also, this started with kicking Russia out of SWIFT. Horrible decision, leaving them with no other options, no golden roads. So that gets back to how we got to where we're at.
Absolutely. And that's part of our special report if it runs this week. You've had the factors that create a dollar competitor is the rise of other major currencies, euro, Japanese yen, the yuan, digital currencies and cryptocurrencies, shifts in power dynamics. And that's what we're talking about. The geopolitical landscape, including the rise of those emerging economies in China and Russia, and then the multipolar reserve currency system. Now, Mark Chandler, I don't know whether you remember him, Chip, in the early days of Oster Communications,
yes.
Futures World News. He was one of the reporters for us, and now he's chief market strategist for Bannockburn Global Forex, and he's a smart thinker. He writes a story about will China's currency be the next power currency in Barron's this week. So I would suggest reading that. And he just says no. He says China may be Saudi Arabia's biggest customer, but there's no sign that the Saudis will price oil in yuan. It makes no sense on several levels, including the Saudi officials. The Saudi currency, the real, is pegged to the dollar. So you've got points and counterpoints all over the place. But, you know, it was mentioned on the SWIFT, and China put together a SWIFT substitute. It's called CIPS, the cross-border interbank payment system, and they have already 1,400 participants processing $13 trillion, Chip. So that's the beginning of a alternative, even though history says it takes decades really to replace any world currency. And now we've got other countries, Cambodia and Iraq, have confirmed they plan to conduct more trade in the yuan. So what we see some clear shifts going on here.
Yeah, in the past it has taken decades. I think there are some of these issues that you mentioned, you know, digital currencies and just that the world moves faster now than what it did even 20 years ago, Jim, that it could speed it up, but it still would take time. I agree. I mean, I would think that when I end my career, the dollar is still going to be the default currency. I just don't see how it can happen that fast. Maybe it does. Maybe
well,
it
it's
does.
the rule of law that the U.S. favors the U.S. Dollar as opposed to the lack of law in China and Russia. And others.
We better move on.
Yes.
President Biden is not willing to talk about spending cuts to get negotiations on the debt ceiling started, Jim.
Yeah. And there's even end rounds that Democrats and Republicans are talking about, Chip, but they put the kibosh on that over the weekend saying, no. We want to see your plan, you know, Republicans, of how you're going to do the budget. Then we'll start talking. So this is the eye of the tiger on this issue. They're not doing anything.
Okay. Gary makes an interesting point, which speeds it up here. He says, but does this administration care about petrodollar If I'm gonna replace is with if goal is to be done with oil in 2035.
I'd have to think through that.
Yeah,
But
I do too, Gary.
yeah.
That might be another one of those factors, one of those issues that speeds the progression. But I don't know if it makes it happen.
But this always
pretty cool.
spurs interest in electric vehicles, Chip. You know that one.
Mhm.
And over the weekend, I went with a friend and we went to about 5 dealerships, and I was just amazed of the lack of inventory still. Honda, he eventually bought a 2023 Honda Accord, which is a very good car. But while we were negotiating, 2 other couples came and wanted the same car. So it's wild because of the lack of inventory. And I just want to look at an Ioniq 6, a pure electric car. You got to get on a waiting list for them. They're just not available.
Jim, you just described what might be one of my nightmares, taking you along to do a negotiation on a new vehicle. Holy smokes.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
That's why my friends pick me.
That is a dear friend. Don't lose that one. Don't lose that one. How about the Russian military blogger that was killed with a Trojan bomb?
Yeah.
She handed it to him and then the thing went off.
Yeah. It shows now Ukraine is saying this was a disgruntled Russian about the war.
Part of the division.
Yeah,
within Russia.
Russia says it's clearly Ukraine, but it shows an escalation, Chip. That's the point. It shows they're getting inside Russia, and that elevates it.
Boy, that's hand delivered right there.
Yes.
In front of people that were injured in the blast.
But we are seeing lots of change in the Ukraine-Russia war. Now, we talked about last week, I guess, Cargill pulling out in a sense, not totally,
and Viterra,
because they're still going to be involved. But Putin is using the export taxes to fund that war, Chip. Yeah. So he wants even more control on Ukraine exports, and he's getting it.
Yep. Okay. Congress is on 2-week Easter recess, but there's still some panel discussions and so on that we need to pay attention to. On Tuesday, disaster aid and crop insurance reforms. The American Enterprise Institute for Public Policy Research is having a discussion titled Reforming the Federal Crop Insurance and Disaster Aid Programs. That's an important one to watch.
That's an important one to watch, and some little perspective here. AEI is a very conservative think tank, okay? And they have really taken significant shots at the subsidies and the crop insurance program. So it will that out in front. I wanted to say that. So we'll have to see, but they've got some pretty good people speaking at that Confab Tuesday. So definitely we're covering it.
Okay. On Wednesday, CFTC Ag Panel. They're having a teleconference of the Ag Advisory Committee on the issues related to the ag economy. What's going on with this one?
Well, a host of reasons. On the logistics side, they'll bring up the fertilizer side, the railroad system, etc. That'll be another good one. In a slow week in Congress, we have these 2 important hearings that affect the ag sector. And of course, the troubles that we've had issuing the CFTC Commitments of Traders report will probably be brought up as well, because that affected the markets.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. It did. I didn't realize how much I missed the Commitment of Traders or how much I used the Commitment of Traders data until it was gone.
Yeah.
And the market needs that information, my opinion.
But this is the good side of CFTC, Chip, because it's bringing stakeholders in the industry there to talk about sensitive issues. But that's always good as far as I'm concerned. Air them out.
Yep, absolutely. U.S. Trade Representative, Chief Ag Negotiator Doug McCallop is going to be traveling to Brazil on Friday.
Yeah, that's to talk ethanol. So that's they're going to see. That's another potential positive thing about U.S. Ethanol, Chip. So we've got some positive news going on there.
Hey, the Next Generation Fuels Act was reintroduced. reintroduced. What's going on?
I haven't covered it that much, as you know, because usually when a bill is reintroduced, it has even lower odds of getting through than it did the first time. But
Yeah.
I'll continue to watch it. But this Congress, Chip, is at loggerheads on almost every issue, including that one.
Yeah, you know, the one thing I go back to, I think it was Ford decided to make a big investment on the next generation ICE engine, and or the next generation of the internal combustion engine. That makes me think that the possibility is there that if the automakers do get engaged with the potential of the Next Gen Fuels Act, that could change the outlook for that piece of legislation, I think.
And even in the administration, once they hopefully realize that these new fuels will help meet their goals in some areas,
Yeah.
they could be turned around. So, oh yeah, definitely, I wouldn't give up.
Right. Okay. House Speaker is expected to meet. Well, I should start with House Minority Leader Jeffries has already met with the president of Taiwan, correct?
Yeah, over the Friday, over the weekend.
Yeah.
And then, and China has already thrown out some bombshell quotes that there would be retaliation. But I'm not seeing the nervousness that it was following former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. So I think this will blow over, Chip.
Well, House Speaker McCarthy is going to meet with him this week at some point, isn't he?
Yes, in California. California. Yeah.
Okay. And let's see, before we get to that one, on the economic front, we get the March employment data is going to be released on Friday
when markets are closed.
With the markets closed.
Yeah.
Heads up there. Man, oh man.
Well, the oil price situation, if we go up another 25 cents on gasoline prices, which some people are saying, that puts another hold on the Fed. You know what I mean? That they should just hold off on doing anything.
Right.
On interest rates.
We get the restart of the weekly crop progress reports today. That's going to give us the first national winter wheat crop ratings of the spring. And on Tuesday, former President Donald Trump is expected to appear in court for his arraignment following his indictment last week by a Manhattan grand jury on more than 30 counts related to business fraud.
Yes, and Tuesday night he'll be back at Mar-a-Lago to give a speech. So there's both sides of that one. It's just a ugly development in the history of our great country. That's about what I'll say.
You know, there were several district attorneys that looked at the same charges over the last, 7, 8 years?
It's been a while. Yes.
Yeah. Over the last 7 or 8 years, and could not figure out how to elevate the misdemeanors to a felony charge. Yeah. And they would have brought it just as happily as what the current DA seems to be bringing it.
Yeah, well, that's why we need to see the indictment unsealed. We got to see what the reasoning is, Chip, and we'll see Tuesday.
Yep. It sounds like former President Trump is going to surrender, willingly.
Yes.
It does not sound like they're going to get the perp walk with he's not going to be handcuffed.
No.
As he enters the court building. But they will get their their mugshot.
Yeah, and that's what they want.
And there are some people out there that say if he gets his mugshot, he's going to use it more effectively than the Democrats will, and it will be Trump versus Biden again. No question in 24.
Yeah, the people I respect in the election watching have started upping their odds that we're going to have a Biden-Trump battle again for the presidency, and it looks like that's who the Democrats want because it'll be up to the independents and the women voters again, and Trump doesn't have a good history in that regard. At least that's the Democratic strategy, some people say.
All right. I just got some good news. I mean, just this moment, we are going to have Phil Flynn from Price Futures Group, the energy analyst there. He's excellent. He's going to be on the show this morning along with Machinery Pete. We really appreciate that happening. Jim, good work here this morning. Thank you so much. Come back for AgriTalk, 10:06 Central Time and 2:06 Central Time. We'll be talking markets this afternoon, obviously. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening and watching today. Have a great week. Keep watching for those signals.